Hello, good morning and good evening to folks. This is Tuesday, March 8th in the evening or Wednesday, March 9th in the morning, depending on where you are. This is the Velero community meeting and open discussion. So without further ado, looking down, we've got March 8th. Looks like Daniel has a status update. Is Daniel here? Oh, Daniel, I see you. Do you want to give your, oh, he's still connecting to audio. Hello, Daniel. I don't know if you can hear us yet, but when you're ready, we are delighted to have your status update.
Oh, sorry, I was setting up my audio.
No problem at all. Are you ready to give your update, or do we need to kill time for a moment until you're ready?
I need a few seconds to.
No problem. Take your time. Let's see if I have any updates. I'm not sure if I have any this week. So we will just give Daniel, we'll just give everyone a moment. When Daniel's ready, he'll start his status update. Or if when Kai's ready, he's welcome to jump in too.
Okay. I'm preparing the RC build for 1.1, and we have fixed some bugs and CVEs. Hopefully, we can make the GA release early next week. And I'm also doing some fix some bugs targeting 1.9.
Great.
This is here from me.
Thank you for the update. Any questions for Wen Kai? Okay.
So I had, so I know Wen Kai had asked me about the 172. So we tested the RC 172 build, seems fine. So yeah, if we want to go ahead and tagging it with GA, that's fine too.
Thanks.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Very glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm ready for my update.
Let's go to Daniel then. If anyone else has questions for Wen Kai, feel free to ask after Daniel's update. Yeah, so Daniel, go for it.
Yeah, last spring I've been reviewing some design PRs like existing resource policy, and I also bring the plugin versioning design back for review by Scott and Fong. And we can discuss that later. I see Fong add that to the discussion topics. In addition to that, I'm doing some investigation on the CSI plugin, mainly testing it on the public cloud. I think next step, in the next meeting, I think hopefully there will be a list of issues. We're gonna go through them and talk about the things we're gonna work on before we announce GA for AWS and Azure.
Thank you for the update. Do people have any questions for Daniel? Obviously, the plugin versioning stuff, we can wait a moment till we get to Fong's discussion topic, but any other questions?
So, so for that 172, right, our assumption is all those CVEs apply only for the RESTIC binary, because that is the older.
Which, sorry, 1728 you said? I can pull that up.
No, 172. So the RC
172. Sorry.
Yes,
Keep
sorry.
going.
My favorite topic of CVEs. Sorry.
Not a problem. I just misheard. So sorry. Keep going with your question.
No. So the question was, we found a CVEs, but I think it was Daniel's update that these are all belonging to the RESTIC binary, right? Because that's using the older one.
Right.
Yeah, so with that assumption, I think 170 is good. So
great. I'm really glad that we could get something out that works, that helps support data protection on Kubernetes.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions for Daniel before we move on to Fong's topics? Fong, we hand it over to you then.
Yeah. So I have two topics. One of them is I think we both talked about last week, but I want to point it out. that I did some research, additional research on this topic. And if you scroll down all the way to the end, is my latest comment on it, in which is saying that we currently have the internal plugin backup, and in that we already for every single time we see a pod, we're gonna collect all the persistent volume claim, the PVC belong to that pod as well. So what I think we can do is, on top of that, we can enhance that plugin to also pick up the priority, pick up the priority class, and same thing, similar for the restore. Yeah, I think we can also do the same thing there. So I think for this chain, I think we can get it done, within the next release, because I think the chain might be small, maybe just a few line of code chain in the pod action.go for backup, and similarly for the pod action .go in the restore. If you guys think that is also a good idea, I think we can go ahead and start, implementing it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I already commented on the issue, but my thinking is that originally there was the earlier discussions already said, hey, we think the way to do this is with a backup item action, and basically you discover that we already have a backup item action that does something very similar. We just need to do the same for one additional resource type. So it seems to me that it would make a lot more sense to just add one section to the execute for this existing backup item action rather than creating a whole new one and registering it and have a separate thing to be processed. I mean, this would also, because there would be less code to execute as well, because we're already running this for every pod, and it's just one more thing. And also, over time, if there are additional resources that we realize that pods depend on, this would be the place to add those as well.
Yeah. So if you guys okay with that, then I think I'm gonna wrap it and start to implementing it. There should be a few live code. All right, so that's good. Okay, so the second issue, I think Daniel and Scott are all here. So I think we can start talking about the Velero versioning, plugin versioning, right? So I did review it and I approve it. Scott also approved the design, right? If there's anything else you can do on that one, Daniel?
Yeah, I think I'm going to tweak the wording to explicitly point out that Velero will only work with the latest version, and all the previous version need to be adapted somehow to the latest version, and will provide the adapter in Velero's code base. I think that's generally the plan, right? We're on the same page.
I think so. I mean, let's just be clear though. The plugin writer does not have to adapt every plugin. It's that when you update the API, it's when we create the new version, the adapter will be included. And at least if it's a backwards compatible version, we say, okay, version 2 is going to add this new function to the interface, but the adapter is going to provide a default implementation of that, just as an example. So the adapter, so basically when you create a new API version, for one, not an API version, but when you create a new interface version for one of these plugin types, part of that role, or part of that implementation is the adapter. And got it. Yeah. And that's key, because if I write a plugin that I'm using with Velero 1.8 right now, and then when 9 comes out and has the new API out, my old 1.8 plugin should still work with Velero 1.9. Now, obviously, I won't get any of the functionality for the new function outside of what the adapter provides. So to take advantage of that, I would need to update the plugin to make those changes. But the old plugin, in most cases, should still work as long as it's a backwards compatible change.
But there is the possibility that the adapter can adapt your old plugin, but it doesn't really work as you expected, because it may use some default value for some new parameter or something. Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no guarantees that it's going to work perfectly. Right. Adapters do the best they can, and in some cases it'll be fine, and in some cases, again, as an example of the change that I was hoping to make with this for restore item action with the the waiting for additional items. The adapter would basically always return true, saying we're good. There will be no waiting. So that's the kind of change that's easy to adapt to. There may be other changes where it's not as easy, and the plugins might be degraded in some way if they don't have that functionality.
Yeah, yeah. So I think next step, I'm gonna do some refinement to tweak the wording in the design, make it ready for review. So you need to, Feng and Sky, you may need to approve again to make sure that design is merged. And do we want to discuss what we want to deliver in version 1.9 timeframe?
After the design coming in, I plan to start implementing for what Dell EMC needs, which is the backup item for PVC. So I want to implement that first because, of course, I'm from that company, so
yeah, sure.
I have to be a little bit selfish there. So we need that first. So we're gonna try to implement that first. And if Scott interested, he can also implementing other plugins that he is interested in.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the one. That's the one I was talking about. Basically the change that I want to make is adding a single function to the restore item action interface, and that's the kind of the waiting for things to be ready. And so that should be relatively easy to add as well. In the same, basically the same time when you add the timeouts that you need, to the interface, this could be another function we can add to the interface. Is put in the same release cycle probably.
Yeah, but there are some groundwork needed in the framework, and we need to move all the files. So how do we proceed? I think we create a new branch and work on it together.
Yeah, I mean all that changed. So the moving around to the V1. Yeah, basically we have to make everything work with okay, and we now have V1 for everything. Once V1 is there for everything, then we can deal with V2 and additional things.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. Okay, let's work together on that one. One thing I want to point out here is the responsibility when things that break, right? When we have the versioning chain that break the interface, who's responsible to fix it? So we want to spell out that if the vendor of the plugin provide the old version, and when we update to the new version, is it up to the vendor to update their plugin to work with the new version? It's not our responsibility of the Velero community to do that. We do the adapter as a best effort. It's up to the vendor to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just as a practical concern, we can't update, plugins that aren't in the Velero upstream repo because we don't have, as a community, we don't have commit rights to someone else's plugin. Obviously, if it's a Red Hat plugin, I can work on that one, but you can't. So whoever is maintaining a plugin is going to be the one responsible to update it and create a new version. Velero is only going to be maintaining things that are under the Velero, umbrella there.
Yeah. Okay.
Just so I understand, we've got the sorry, my window. We've got that list of plugins and who maintains them. It sounds like it'll just, sorry, one sec, plugins. Basically, I mean, it's the same list here. So we agree that basically the ones under Velero supported plugins, these are the ones that the Velero team maintains. That'll continue going forward. And likewise, the community supported providers. These are the plugins that we're talking about, correct?
Well, yeah, what we're talking about with this change is, the plugin interface itself could change. So, we might have a V2 of the restore item action plugin interface, and the adapter that we're talking about should allow a legacy plugin to still work, but with some, default functionality. So, in other words, to update that restore item action plugin, anyone that's like, for example, basically what if there's a community provided plugin that implements that plugin, we have a new version of that interface. So it's not a new version of the plugin, that might add additional functionalities that for them to make use of, they're going to have to provide a new one. The adapters we're talking about are basically kind of a best effort approach to say, we want to make sure we do everything we can on the Velero side to still work with the old plugins. But if there's a major change to the interface that adds something that's essential, for operation, that's then it would be up to a community divided, and whoever is maintaining that plugin, if there's an impact, they would have to fix it. But again, with the adapters, and I know for the changes that Feng and I are talking about, at least for this first iteration of new interface changes, these aren't the kinds of things that should break other plugins because they're optional.
That should not.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for clarifying for me.
Sure.
Okay.
That's it for me. That's it from my side. Yeah.
Great. Anything want to say anything else about Velero plugin versioning before we move on to Tiger's such things? Tiger, on to you.
Hi guys. So this is my first discussion topic. So I don't know what if it's gonna be like the right way to say things, but I just wanna. So we are looking into like so someone told us that they have like an expired backup because they set in TTL, like time to live, right? And the backup has failed validation, and they don't care that it failed validation because it expired already. So they wanted this backup to disappear like every other TTL backup. So they were wondering if we could just delete it anyway because it's already expired, instead of current behavior, which is acknowledging that it expired and just leaving it in the log, but the object still stays in the Kubernetes resource. So basically just want to discuss with the team if like you guys think this should be a new default or if this should be a new like feature flag.
And I'm going to just repeat what I had said to Tiger earlier, just for larger group context as well. It seems to me that in most cases that's the right thing to do. I mean, so normally when a backup expires, the Velero will delete the backup contents in the backup storage location and then remove the Kubernetes resource. And if the backup is not valid because either the backup storage location is gone or it's inaccessible or whatever, right now it sounds like we're just leaving it there. And I can imagine a use case for that. For example, a user, if the backup storage location is inaccessible or we deleted it accidentally, but there's this backup somewhere taking up gigabytes of space, and if Velero just removes it, it goes away, they may not know that. So that may be a reason to keep the current functionality. But on the other hand, in the case where it's already been cleaned up, the bucket's gone anyway, Velero's never getting rid of these things. Now it's cluttering up the Velero backup list. So I can kind of see use cases either way. But that case of let's just leave it around forever because we can't find this underlying storage, maybe an edge case that may not need to be the default. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to point out that I could see arguments either way. I would be inclined to say the default should probably be to get rid of it, but maybe we want a setting to allow that not to happen. Then again, I don't have the background for why this was done originally. This may have been intentional. It may be that the initial functionality was this, and someone put an issue in saying, "Hey, this inaccessible backup just gets deleted from Velero," and then when we fix the connection to AWS or whatever, it doesn't get cleaned up because the Kubernetes resource is now gone. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably the thinking behind it.
Yeah.
But we do have like a backup delete request.
Right.
So what about adding like a force flag there where it says, ignore validation, do whatever you can to delete it, and whatever's left behind is whatever happened.
Yeah. Now, Tiger, when you looked into this, do you know whether a backup deletion request actually works now for this? I mean, I know the automatic cleaning up doesn't, but if you actually create a deletion request for this invalid backup, will it delete it or will it error out in the same way saying it's invalid, we're not going to do anything with it?
I haven't checked on the deletion request, but if I understand correctly, it's the garbage collection code that specifically look for like not completed backup or like something that failed validation. And if it sees it, it just blocks it and it just skip deleting it.
Okay, so the deletion request, so manually deleting it may still work. We're not sure. And then I guess the other question is this something that might make sense as an optional setting to say, hey, I don't, we just want to delete things that, that are expired, regardless of validity. As I said, I can see a reason why some people may not want this behavior, but if this is a question of, some users want X and others want Y, do we want to make this configurable? Rather than saying, hey, you have to manually delete these things. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
But I think it will be tricky. It will be tricky in regards to how we expose this configuration, right? Do we set it in the backup itself, or?
That's a good question. I'm not, or
Should,
I'm not really sure
should
what
it work with like a, should it work if we put like a force flag into it? Like when we delete, we put a /f or something like that.
No, I think Tiger is talking about the expired backup.
Right, exactly.
So,
I suspect the delete still works, but I'm not sure. I mean, if you do a Velero backup delete, which creates the deletion request for a backup where the the backup storage location is invalid, that may still delete it. I'm not sure. I haven't tried it myself recently.
Yeah, I personally, I incline to the implementation that, if the manual deletion works, I think we're probably okay, because we are allowing user to do, if we expose the configuration, Scott, you mentioned, we are allowing user to configure it in a way that may cause them trouble in the future, but they are not fully aware of the situation they may get into, right? So I'm a little reluctant to provide such configuration or change the default behavior, because if there's a connection issue between Velero and the BSL, like you mentioned, the storage may be taken and not freed forever without people knowing it. So that's my personal take. What do you think, Tiger?
Sorry, I missed out on that. What was the?
Yeah, I mean, if we, for instance, if we make this a new default, people may get into the situation that the backup is removed, but the storage is still taken by the backup, right? And people are not aware of it by merely checking Velero. If we expose this configuration, people may set this configuration, which may cause trouble for them in the future. So I don't want to expose a configuration like this, because when the user set this configuration, they may not fully aware of the impact of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I guess part of the challenge here is that there's several things that can cause a backup to get into state, and some of them are the dangerous. For example, a temporary network, availability issue with the backup storage location could cause this, and that's a case where you definitely wouldn't want to be cleaning this out. You'd want to wait till the storage was back online so that you could delete things properly. On the other hand, if a user goes in there and manually clears out the bucket outside of Velero, and then the backup's not there, there's a case where you actually probably would want Velero to clean it up. But how do you?
So can we introducing? Agreed. So can we introduce something like allow list? Like if there's certain error happened, we can still delete it in the expire situation. But if there's other error, we just mark it and leave it there, instead of providing any configuration. I think the configuration
that might make sense, especially if we can distinguish certain cases. I mean, I don't know how many different cases the current code distinguishes that does this logging, but again, I think the three I can think of right now is the reference backup storage location doesn't exist at all in Velero because someone deleted it. That's one case. Another case is you can't find the backup. You look in the bucket because you have that configuration, but the backup's gone. And then the third case is you can't access the backup storage location. And I think in the backup storage location is inaccessible. That's a fairly obvious one. You don't want to be deleted, I think. I think if you can access it and the backup is not there because someone cleaned out the bucket, there's a case where it should be safe to delete. If the backup storage location doesn't exist, that's a little bit of a more iffy case because I'd be inclined to say that's safe to delete because Velero no longer has a way of referencing that storage at all anymore. Maybe the only case where we definitely don't want to delete is the inaccessible storage case. But again, that third case I'm less clear on. That could go either way.
Yeah, I think currently I'm inclined that we check the arrow and do the force deletion for a certain arrows. For the other case, we just leave the backup because we really want to avoid the situation that the storage is taken and it loses connection to Velero, right? So, what do you guys think? Do you agree? If that's the case, I think we can continue doing some discussion and the investigation offline to push forward toward this situation. I'll add some comment to the issue.
I would say to investigate, basically, let's take a more granular approach of looking at the current use scenarios that cause the logging and moving on and not deleting, and then just once we get a list of the different scenarios that Velero is currently considering, let's decide for each of those what the right answer is. I think some of those it'll be obvious we'll all agree on, and there's other ones that might require follow-on discussion. Maybe.
Sounds good.
Sorry, I should have clarified. Did our discussion go into this issue? It sounds like it did. Or did you want to talk about this separately?
That's the issue we were talking about. I think we were talking about kind of details around. In other words, I think what we're kind of leaning towards not doing exactly what that issue is proposing, but possibly taking a more granular approach of doing some of that, but not all of that. And we just need to continue discussion on the issue to kind of nail down.
Yeah,
exactly
I'll add a comment. Yeah, to describe this situation.
Fantastic. Okay, are we done with discussion topics from Tiger or anything else to say on this matter before we move on?
I think it's all good. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for bringing this as a topic. Shubham, it is to you next. Which PR, do you want me to open either of them or do you want to talk about them both at the same time?
You can open up the first one.
Yes.
So as an action item for this design PR, I updated it with the command line updates with the whatever is needed regarding the implementation details of a new flag for existing resource policy in Velero CLI. Then I also updated it with the unrelated proposal goals, that what we are not going to do in this design. And I would like to know whether we are whether the team is okay with going ahead with approach number 1.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with number 1, but I personally don't quite like we providing the update and update all at the same time.
I think it's worth bringing up. And Shubham and I had some discussions around this offline as well. I think I'm inclined to agree that let's just simplify it to basically what we were describing as the update all functionality. That should just be the update. And basically, I don't think we really need a case where we don't update the the labels.
Scroll to the last comment on the PR.
Yeah. Okay.
But Shubham, I think we're kind of all agreeing that makes sense. I think the one thing missing is the PR itself hasn't been updated for that yet, or I haven't looked at it.
I was just waiting if everyone is in agreement. I would just update the design with the this one comment.
Got it. Okay, so it sounds like we're all three of us are on the same page there. As if anybody else has a comment, before, but it sounds like right now we're all agreeing that we're going to get rid of the separate update and update all and merge those into a single behavior.
If that's okay, I'll update the PR and I can open up an implementation PR with this approach.
And I did want to say one other thing about the sort of, scenario, sort of the approach 1 versus 2 versus 3. I think all of us are kind of agreeing that the simpler approach to set a single policy for the entire restore is what we want to do here. With the idea that if we eventually needed to take that more granular approach described in that combined approach 3, that could be follow-on functionality for, Velero 111 or whatever sometime in the future. This doesn't, and the approach 1 is kind of the most friendly towards that kind of follow-on enhancement anyway. So let's start with the simpler thing that can be built on if we ever need that, and we may never need to go to that point. So.
Yep. So I'll update the PR then.
I think Yonghui, are you on the line?
Sorry.
Yes.
I thought you have some comment regarding this PR. So are you okay with this agreement?
So let me see. So my comment should be above, and just scroll above. So here. Yes, the below one, And
is this you? No, Lyndon Lee?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I was looking for your name. Sorry, which comment do you want? Down?
Okay, so the thing is like, we want users to delete the deprecated resources that has been deleted since the last backup time. And that means, so users will leverage our labels to check which resources are deprecated. So the things like finally, that is our label to tell users you can delete these resources. And so the point here is, what if we failed to update the label? What we'll do with that? Because if the label failed to be updated, and the user will get wrong indication, and it will they may delete the resources erroneously. That's the point.
Yeah, and I actually, I think that was a really important point that I felt we needed to respond to. And that, what I had proposed that Shubham added to his approach here is basically the way we should approach that is if the attempt to update a label fails, we should log that not as a warning, but an actual restore error. That way, if the user sees their restore failed, they could go in and look and see what happened. And I'm distinguishing the labels from everything else. If you're updating a resource and you couldn't update something because something that was immutable changed, that's a warning. And then we attempt to just update the label. But if all you're trying to do is update a label, and that update fails, I mean, that should be a very rare event. But if it does happen, we should just fail to restore. We should, if the label update does not succeed, we log that as an error, not a warning. The user sees that their restore failed, the message says label update, failed, and now they know that that label is not safe to use for deletion.
Yeah. Okay, Daniel, go ahead.
No. You go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to say that, with this change of the design, we have, slightly change of the design, and we finally have a case that will fail the restore job or the restore. So if that is acceptable, I think it's fine to me, but I don't know whether in this case we failed the restore, it is okay or not.
Yeah, I actually think in this case, it's safer to fail the restore because it's like you said, if you don't fail the restore, you could have a user doing a label-based delete that ends up deleting all of those resources that, that we couldn't have hit labels on, and that would be disastrous for the user. Whereas if it failed, they have to go and look, and if, then they say, oh, okay, my restore failed. The only failures related to these label updates, the only real impact on the user at that point is they now know it's not safe to delete by label anymore. And again, if they choose the none policy where we don't update resources that exist already, that's the preserve current Velero behavior. Then we won't be failing anything because we won't be attempting to update those labels.
Yeah, I hope, I just want to point out, I hope in this design, we explicitly point out this situation and explain why we fail.
Yeah, yeah.
I
mean that's exactly right. The action, because when you fail, when you create an error on a restore, you have a message you put there, and that message needs to say, Velero restore label update failed. And maybe an additional sentence, don't use Velero restore labels for deletion or something like that. Again, making it clear that our keeping track of which restore, which resources are up to date based on the restore,
right,
is now invalid because of this error.
Yeah. I just hope we also mention that we expect user to delete a resource based on the label or annotation.
Yeah, well,
I think we need to clearly point out this scenario in this design, and we explain, in certain cases that will fail to avoid.
I would clarify. We're giving the user the option to delete resources. They don't have to delete them. If the user wants to use this feature as a means of identifying what they want to delete, we're providing that. Velero is obviously not going to be deleting it for the users, and the user doesn't need to delete it if their workflows don't require it. But we're enabling them to delete based on labels with this, and as a result, these kinds of errors that we need to call out for them, if you see these, you need to not delete based on labels until you investigate, because it means that Velero is failing to. No, and again, I'm hoping that this is a very rare kind of failure. It's important to document and to deal with. But if a cluster, if updating labels on a resource is failing, I don't know. That seems like something must be wrong with the cluster at that point.
Yeah, something must be wrong with the server. Yeah.
But nonetheless, we do need to track it and deal with it, because if something is wrong, we need to report that something is wrong rather than the user learning it as they delete all our stuff.
Right. Yeah, I'm good as long as this is covered in the design clearly. This scenario.
Yeah. I'll update the design with the last comment. If we are in agreement, then yeah.
Yeah, and right. That's not. I don't think that's in the design yet, because that's just something that came out of the last few comments that we discussed. So that update will be along with the update all change, I think.
Yep. Sure thing.
Are we good to move to the other design now?
Yeah.
Great.
So regarding this design, Daniel, are you okay with the approach? Like you had some concerns with the current design approach, right?
Right. I personally feel that we providing the selector and selectors plural as the parameter is really confusing design.
But then it would preserve your existing Velero's behavior as well as add a new behavior to Velero, right? You cannot actually support or clause with the existing Velero behavior.
Yeah, I understand. But I think as a tool or CLI tool, if I add the help option and see a selector and selectors option, that really doesn't look very good. So I think if we first, I'm a little I'm not very sure if this is really needed.
We have a use case for a user that actually does want this functionality. Is what kind of is driving this on our side is someone that's trying to do this.
So if this is really needed, can we make the current selector to support different settings, so that like we can support the in semantic, so we can say dash L X in ABC, so that's also implement the or semantic, right? Does it make sense?
The end does implement some subset of or I think what I don't know, and Shiba maybe, or actually Dylan may know more about this, in terms of the actual user running into this, would the limited or functionality provide? Because I know N would provide or for a single label, like this label is one of these, so that, but it would not provide a label where for example you could say where component is Velero or name is foo. That kind of or would not be supported by the in clause. Again, I don't know as much about the use case.
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
so.
If the in can be supported, we can, introduce something different. But I really want to keep there's only one selector.
In is already supported, but it's different than what we are thinking. Can you scroll down a bit, Eleanor? There's an example. Yeah. Below that, the black piglet comment. Yeah. So are you saying this, Daniel? If you see the example, the use case is a bit different than what you are thinking, I think.
Yeah, I understand. Maybe there is a limitation in the Kubernetes implementation that or is not supported very well. But I think what I really hope we can do is we extend the supported value of the existing selector parameter instead of introducing a selectors which will coexist with selector, and this is really confusing.
So are you saying we should consider, instead of just using standard Kubernetes selectors, come up with our own extension that's not standard Kubernetes here? I mean, that's because that would be the only way we'd be able to do that. That might be confusing too for users that are expecting Kubernetes syntax to work here.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
There's another possibility I'm wondering is that, and maybe this might help some of the confusion, is if we consider the multi-value one kind of an advanced option that, you can, if you're manually creating the Velero backup CR, you can add it in there, but maybe we don't expose this in the CLI. In other words, this is kind of an advanced user situation that it would only be supported if you're manually creating that Velero resource. And we just don't expose this in the Velero create CLI.
I think that's a good suggestion, but still in the CR API, we still need a clarified field. Let's avoid using selector and selectors at the same time.
I mean, there is precedent in Kubernetes doing similar things where they had a single value field and then they added a multi-value field because they needed it. For example, Kubernetes, what was it? Oh yeah, the service has a cluster IP field, and then they added a cluster IPs field, which is multiple values.
Yeah, but
a later Kubernetes version.
Yeah, but that's not a very good situation, right? So right.
I mean, but I mean, they had the same problem, is that they needed multiple values, but they didn't want to break backwards compatibility, and they decided that it was better for it to look slightly confusing than for them to break backwards compatibility in ways that would actually break users who were using these values before. Because the one advantage of this approach, as opposed to just creating a new API version and getting rid of it, is that any existing Velero backup, definition you're using with the single value parameter will still work. Doesn't need to change. This provides an optional, because we're basically adding, because right now the selectors already have, you can specify included namespaces, and you can specify included resources and excluded resources, and you have the label selectors, and this provides we already have 4 different things we can select on, and this is adding kind of a 5th one that would be optional to use.
So if we are okay with not introducing in the Velero CLI, I can do that, remove it from the design and just keep it as an API option.
Yeah, I'll take another look at the API. I think not exposing it on the CLI make things a little better, but yeah.
The thing is that I would just be careful about is that, I understand the concern about, possibly making it confusing, but, I wouldn't want to tell a current Velero user that we're not going to make Velero do what you need, because some future user that isn't even using Velero yet might be confused by it. I think we need to be careful about that, and maybe we can document things properly. It's one thing that we want to make things as clear as possible, obviously, but I think eliminating functionality that we have current users that want, because it might confuse somebody, I think we need to be careful about that too, because you know.
Yeah. I would also not like to depreciate the existing behavior and confuse users. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, the advantage of this approach too is that basically, if you never knew about it, nothing changes about the way you use Velero. Everything just works the same as it did before. But if you read the new documentation that we would need to produce around this as to how to do it and what it means, this gives you some options as well. And again, because there are other examples of Kubernetes where they have things that, you have something with a single value and a multi-value, and they both coexist, as long as we describe in the API documentation what the two of them mean together, because and in this case, what we're saying in the design here is, because these multiple parameters that we already provide, included namespaces and included resources and excluded, basically right now, every single one of those, if you specify it, it must be met, which means if we add this new label selectors, if a user specifies it, then that has to, it has to qualify, it has to be true, then evaluate to true for a resource to be included. Just like the old value that only has a single selector also has to evaluate here. So normally a user would not want to specify both, because if you're specifying both, that would be confusing. But if you do specify both, they both have to evaluate to, select. It wouldn't be an error to select both. It just wouldn't be something that, would normally be the most efficient way of doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Eleanor, I just wanna give a heads up that this will require some significant, I won't say significant, but this will require some change in the documentation because we changed the API and we need some, I think there should be some clear example, like when the value is set as this and what will happen.
Okay. I would recommend, I guess we haven't talked too much about this, but it might be really great to have as part of the code PR to get this work in, like not the design, but the actual code to PR the docs changes as well.
Okay, yeah. When I do implementation PR, I'll update the docs as well. Yeah,
perfect. And by the way, if you're not quite sure what to do, then we can talk with Abby and we can have you if you give us the information, Abby can put it in. So do your best to PR the docs. If you find that you have questions, then we can do a separate PR, but be thinking about the docs as you do it. Good call out, Daniel.
Yeah, and that would apply to the existing resource policy as well. And also the probably even more so, but actually the other thing we were talking about with the plugin versioning, that obviously needs to be pretty prominent in our plugin documentation as well once that gets implemented.
Now, by the way, I do see we have only 10 minutes left, and I know that Younghui had some stuff to present, although it could wait till next week, or 2 weeks, he had said. So we can either pause this conversation if we feel like we're basically done, or we can, basically I want to do a time check. Shall we go on to Younghui, or shall we keep going with this?
Just one thing, Daniel, could you just comment on the PR if you think we are good with this? Like after you take a look at it, another look at it, it would be great.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it in the next couple of days. If I don't do that, just ping me on Slack, just in case I forget.
Sure thing. Thank you, guys.
Great. Excellent. Oh, okay, I didn't. Okay, and now for the last, Younghui and Ming have this, so I can put it here. So yeah, go for it.
Okay. Let me. For this document is quite long, and let me give some brief introduction to the document so that if you are interested, you can check this offline. And the purpose of this comparison, between the Copia and the Rustic is, we first of all Velero face some quite some issues increasingly from Rustic, and especially the performance issue. And the second point is along with the involvement of Rustic and involvement of the Velero, and we have more requirement to the Rustic to the repository or something like that. Not only to back up the file system, and so we made this comparison. from the architecture level, from the feature level, from the implementation level, and also done some tests. And here I want to only point out the essential point that as the conclusion. First of all, as I just mentioned, even though it's quite a long story, but I will make it brief. Like we want to back up every kind of data and then write to a report server, and then leverage the take advantage of the benefits like the dedupe, compression, encryption, as well as many other things from the report server. Not only like the currently, we only do this for file system. So we need to find a way to integrate with the report server. And as you can see from the beginning of the document, that we treat the reticle copy not only like file system data mover, but also like a report server. Because if you move down to the next page, you can see that from the architecture, the very top level is like a file system enumerator, that is to traverse the file system. And then after that, we have a data processor. We want to call it a data processor because we want it to work for every kind of data. At the bottom, it is the block repository, something like that. Both Retic and Copia have the same architecture. And so the first problem is how we can, for example, if we back something not from file system, how we can integrate with the Retic or Copia. We know how to integrate with Copia because if you see the bottom, the second diagram, we can see that we can read the data from anywhere and write it directly to the C content addressable object storage. Yeah, this place. But for Retic, we don't know how to do that because if we do it from the file saver level, just have a look at the first diagram. If we do it from the file server level, we cannot do that because we are not handling any file. We are handling any kind of data stream from things like this block. But if we do that from the blob saver or report server level, we will miss the functionality like variable trunking and some things that have already been the file saver. So that is the first concern we have for the for the point for the comparison. That is from the architecture level, and the second point that is from the feature level. And we can go to the next page. Feature level. For the feature level, we can see both Retic and Copia have many features, but one key point we want to point out that Retic don't have compression, and we treat compression as an important part of the report server. I mean the backup report server, because it is another important way to reduce data. That is for the feature level. And the later things are, the next page. The later things is like, from the implementation, we analyze the implementation of the both, and we see that the conclusion is that we cannot say Copia is overwhelmingly better as an implementation because for some but it has some it is trying to fix some problem, or it is trying to give some alternatives to fix the problem. For example, the important thing we have found out is that the first thing for the file cache after the Retic or Copia read the data out and do the chunk, and what Retic will do is it first save the data, any data it read out to a local temporary file, and then read the file and transfer it to the backend storage. That will double the I/O, and it will significantly impact the I/O throughput or any factor of the I/O. That is a very important thing that we can see, and that and we don't understand why RASIC does like that, but that is a fact. And another thing is that about the maintenance and purge. That's something like along with the running of the repository, we may have do often indexes or often blocks, and Copia automatically do this maintenance for every 24 hours or and it actually has two policies, and it is automatically run, but for Copia we must run it manually. That is something like if there is not automatically scheduler, we will have to use users will have to use more repository capacity, and we will have worse or bad repository performance. And another thing is for the maintenance is Copia RASIC will lock down the entire repository during the maintenance or data purge. That is something we cannot accept, because it will take a very long time to do the maintenance, and along that time, people will not be able to use the repository. That is, the two things that we think RASIC, Copia is better than RASIC. And for other things, we see that Copia, neither Copia and RASIC is doing the best. For example, for the index management, I mean the index search and the index catch. First of all, for the index catch, Copia is RASIC is doing all the catching all the index in the memory. And we all know that the memory is not enough, not large enough, along with running the repository. We have many data, so we have many indexes. That is not enough. And for the Copia, for Copia, it is I think it is it already knows this problem, and it's trying to give you the alternatives, like you can store the indexes in memory, and or you can store the indexes on disk. But that is still not good enough, because the best way is to store the indexes part. I mean the hottest part in the memory and some cold part on the disk. That is for the index cache, and for the index search, and RASIC is doing the search in a linear way. That is, we have 1 MB of count of 1 million of the index. The RASIC will search it one by one until it find a matched one, or it doesn't find to the end. But on the other hand, RASIC Copia is doing it in a binary search. And we know binary search is better than the linear search, but it's still not good enough. And we may have very large of index store. So it means that the best way to introduce the more sophisticated algorithm and data structure to handle this. So for this part, we say that neither Copia and RASIC is good enough. That is for the implementation, and you can see the very big part of the document about the implementation. And now let's go to the end of the document, and we see some tests. So according to our finding of the implementation, a little bit down to the next page. The next page. Okay. So according our analysis about the implementation, we have designed some test cases, and for sure that we because of the limit of the data set, And we don't have a natural data set. I mean, from the production environment, we create some data set ourselves. So, you know, the data set is limited, and our, you know, time and the resource is limited. So so it is not a sophisticated, you know, task, but we still want to indicate something from the test result so that we can have our judgment. So the first thing is like, you know, we found that sometimes RESTIC will how say sometimes RESTIC will show unexpected behavior or unstable behavior, especially regarding to the memory usage. If you see if the memory usage for each of these cases, sometimes the memory usage is very high, but we don't understand. It is not the rational value. We don't understand what is it doing. That is the first thing. And another thing is for the test case, if we have a look at test case 4.2 actually, we can see that that is for sure that is the data set is deliberately created. So that is only to show us why the compression works. And you can see that we have disabled the deduplication from the data set. That is, we deliberately make some data set, and the deduplication cannot work. But the content of the file is indeed compressible. So we can see that for the 1 TB of data, and after the compression is enabled, we have very less, you know, the first maybe the first row, and we have very less, very small, you know, part of data in the repository. That is for the compression, and we all know that compression, you know, this is a double edged word and sword, and you know, for one thing, it reduces the data. As for another thing, is it will consume very large CPU. And if we treat, if we have look at the have a look at the case. Wait a minute. Have a look at the case case 3. We will see that the later one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said 3. Case, which one?
Late 3. Case 3 about we have 2 cases in case 3, and the second one, 1 TB of data with urandom.
Right here.
We can see that the data are all we created with random data, and nothing can be compressed. So we can see for the first row, we will see that there is not any effect for the data reduction, but Copia has you know, consumed more CPU. That the case that the compression is disabled, and the second row is the same Copia without that the compression is not enabled. Okay, and more CPU and more time, right? So that is for the testing, performance testing, and for sure that the testing is not, again, it's not enough, very limited. But that, I think that is what we can do at present. And yeah, that is all the point we have found. And I think if you are interested, you can check this doc offline. And so this is a conclusion. I have mentioned the most point during you know, just now. So maybe we can discuss this according to this conclusion later or next meeting.
Yeah, thank you so much for this, walking us through the doc. And I know that you say the testing is less than desired, perhaps, but I really love seeing these data points. I think this is very cool. I would suggest, just because we're over time and also it's a long doc with a lot of information in it, let's have everyone read through it over the next 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, when we're back again in this time for the community meeting, then let's make sure we have an agenda item to talk through these conclusions and kind of see if we can align around whether we should move to Copia in a future release. Does that work for folks? Oh, I think
yeah.
Tiger at least doesn't have access. Oh, you know what? I wonder if it's VMware specific. How hard would it be to put this doc on the wiki, do you think? You've got lots of graphs. What I would say,
I think you can make it public. Is it?
Public from the Google Doc directly, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay,
it has to
okay.
be hung by. Why don't you try? I don't know if you can try just for a moment. Since we have Tigers, we have non-VMware folks here to tell us if they have access. What we should do for sure is once we kind of finish tweaking this, we should eventually probably move this to the wiki, but we can talk about that later. But this is great.
So I don't know, we want to wrap up? Or?
Yeah, I guess. Oh, sorry. I was waiting to see if sorry. I wasn't sure if Young Hui was making it public now. I'm not sure that sorry, that was unclear. Did you just try to make it public or not yet?
Not yet. I think
we can try later and send it to the
Perfect.
the Velero dev.
Okay, sorry.
Channel.
You know what we could do actually, if one of you can try by like using an incognito window and try using like a Gmail account, then you can test it. Sounds good. Yeah. What we'll do is if we can't make it public, we'll put it on the wiki. But let's have a goal, team in Beijing, if you can try to make it public one way or the other, and then like post on Velero Dev. Definitely. That'd be great. Scott, did you have anything to say or last thoughts?
No.
Okay, so as I said, please everyone take a look at this. If you can't get access by tomorrow, North American time, please ping us. And I think we'll have a really good discussion in 2 weeks. So thanks everyone. Have a wonderful night, morning, depending on where you are.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.